Welcome to the Filmcast's review of The Flash. I'm going to read the plot summary of this movie from IMDb. Barry Allen uses his super speed to change the past, but his attempt to save his family creates a world without superheroes, forcing him to race for his life in order to save the future. End quote. I'm David Chen here with Devindra and Jeff Kanata. And before we begin this review, I do think it's worth acknowledging that Ezra Miller has allegedly been on a reign of terror around the world. And there's many people who are disgusted by what they have done. Ezra Miller uses they, them pronouns, and refuse to watch this movie and refuse to support in any way. And I completely understand that. If that is your position, we totally understand and support that. We've all seen the movie. We're going to talk about the movie, but just wanted to acknowledge that that is a factor. And Ezra Miller's treatment, I think, does in many ways reflect the hypocrisy of Hollywood that this movie is still coming out.
And it's also weird that this movie directly makes fun of that in a way, too. That was
kind
odd.
Of
that was weird.
Yeah. But anyway, all that said, there is a lot of baggage going into this movie. Not just Ezra Miller's terrible deeds, but also this movie is kind of a relic of a different version of the DC universe, right? This was kind of supposed to be one of the follow-ups to Justice League. This character was introduced in Justice League and then now was supposed to help build out this universe that now is probably going to be replaced. Now, the head of DC, James Gunn, has said all options. I don't think James Gunn has ruled out anything when it comes to the Flash. He hasn't said the Flash is definitely out of the next phase of the DC EU, but my guess
this version of the Flash.
This version of the Flash. My guess is
it sure would make life easier.
My guess is this is going to be the last time we see this character on screen, unless this movie makes over $1 billion, which I don't think it will. But we'll see. We
still have Aquaman 2 coming as well, right? Which is a vestige of that previous regime, so to speak. But it's actually kind of a bummer that film is coming after this one, because this one, in a way, could be a really good way to close the book on this. It kind of sums it all up in a way. We'll get to it, I'm sure. But
yeah. So anyway, I bring all that up to say it's a weird movie. It's the fact that it's coming out at this time is weird. The fact that it's in the middle of this big DC shakeup is weird. The fact that its star has been mired in so many controversies because of the terrible things they've done, and therefore has basically not participated in most of the promotion for the film is weird. The fact that a lot of the marketing for the film doesn't feature the star that prominently is weird. So it's just all very, very odd. So that being said, does allow us the opportunity to approach it with virtually no expectations. And given that that's the case,
I don't know if that's true.
Given that that's the case, Devindra, I am curious, what did you think of The Flash?
I was not expecting much going to this movie, specifically because I loved the first It movie. I loved Mama, that first movie by Andy Muschietti. That is a great horror movie. It, too, was one of the more disappointing sequels I remember in recent memory. That whole thing happened. It was so weird. So I
thought you were saying Mama was one of the more, but you're saying It Chapter
number 2.
It Chapter 2, yes.
Was just hugely disappointing to me and made me wonder, is Andy Muschietti a good director? I don't know anymore. But no, I had a lot of fun.
To be fair, the It novel does not have the greatest ending either.
It doesn't have the greatest ending. So, it has a better ending than that. So yeah. I mean, having read it as a teenager, it is messy, but it could be done better. But that being said, I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I think Andy Muschietti has proven himself to be a very capable director of superhero stuff. And this goes back to what we're saying about horror directors being very good at superhero stuff. Genre directors just kind of fit right in. There was also the news recently, I think he's being tapped for the Batman Brave and the Bold. So that's happening. It's happening for him. I had a lot of fun with this movie, despite the Ezra Miller of it all. I do think it made me very multiverse weary, just because we're in this so much in pretty much every single comic property now. I'm getting tired of it. It's a victim of timing because it's coming out right after Across the Spider-Verse and right after Marvel has done a bunch of this stuff. But that's just how I'm seeing it. This movie also is 2.5 hours long. And good God, if any, you're Flash, you're the Flash, you're supposed to be fast. If anything deserved a zippy, nice, fun, comic booky experience, it should have been the Flash. the Flash should not feel like the Slog.
You should be watching this on 2x speed. That's the way the Flash is meant to be watched.
The VFX are also shockingly bad in this movie. There are certain sequences, especially one involving babies, where I looked around the audience, and actually my theater was pretty empty, but I looked around at people and was just wondering if they were as perplexed as I was, because it looked like pre-production first draft, like CG work. It just was really bad. At the same time, I think some of the visuals look fantastic. The way it shows the Speed Force, some of that stuff early on looks good. The way they use the Flash's powers later on too, and when he's joined up with other people, there's like, double Flash action, which we know is going to happen from the trailer. A lot of that stuff looks really cool and is framed really well. So I think Andy Muschietti gets the action part of it. But as a story, as a script, I really wish this was tightened up a bit, because this movie should be a fun, fast romp. It should not feel like it's taking forever to get to, the end.
Yeah. We should acknowledge a few things. First of all, as you pointed out, Devindra, we now have learned that Andy Muschietti has been tapped to direct Batman Brave and the Bold.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the upcoming James Gunn universe, DC universe Batman movies. And I do think that's notable, because it shows that James Gunn and company were impressed enough with this movie that they're like, we want to stay in the Andy Muschietti business. And this was a movie that they actually really enjoyed. James Gunn said it's one of the best superhero films he's ever seen. So it's like, they're sticking with Andy Muschietti. Whether or not there's going to be more of the Flash, open question, but there are definitely going to be more Andy Muschietti movies, probably in the DC universe. The other thing I want to mention is, over the weekend, it came out that the Flash's visuals were supposed to look that weird. I don't know if you saw. Jermaine Lussier and a bunch of other people wrote this up, but at Gizmodo, Jermaine Lussier quoted Andy Muschietti talking about the visual effects of the movie, and the answer that Andy Muschietti provides is, quote, I'm going to quote from the article, "The idea, of course, is we are in the perspective of the Flash. Everything is distorted in terms of lights and textures. We enter this water world, which is basically being in Barry's POV. It was part of the design, so if it looks a little weird to you, that was intended," end quote. Now, I don't buy it. I think it is, if that is true, then I think that they did not convey the effect that they wanted to.
And I also think, like, the design aspect that I would buy in some later scenes, which we'll talk about in spoilers. I would buy it in those scenes. I would not buy it in the scene that's just like the real world slowdown. Like, that's a very different thing.
We see multiple scenes of real world slowdown that do look photorealistic.
Yeah.
So it's like that some of them don't, and it's like it feels clear to me that either the effect did not hit the intended target, or they didn't have a chance to finish it, because there are a ton, like hundreds, if not thousands, of visual effects shots in this movie. So I completely understand why they might not have time to finish them all.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Devindra. The visuals were either awesome or terrible in this movie. They're both. There's some that were great, some that really didn't look like they were done. Jeff Canado, what did you think of The Flash?
Well, Dave, what I thought of The Flash is best summed up in the form of a limerick. By linking today to the past, expectations of mine were surpassed. I'd never have guessed, when I list DC's best, Flash would run to the top quite so fast.
Wow. Ooh. Jeff, also a fan of the Flash movie.
I agree with James Gunn. I think this is one of the best superhero movies ever made. I think it's certainly the best DC superhero movie since Nolan. I had so much fun with this movie. I got emotional. It delivers literally everything I could want from a 2-hour plus summer movie. I think this is one of the best movies of the summer. I had a great time. It's such a bummer to me that Ezra Miller has all of this baggage, because they are amazing in this movie. Like, amazing. Like, the performance... Yeah. Disassociate from, if you are able to disassociate from the real world baggage, the performance is phenomenal. It's a star turn, and they're asked to do so much in this movie, playing multiple characters, and it is so much fun. And the movie acknowledges sort of its influences in that regard, and some of its influences are, some of my favorite movies of all time. And of course, we get Michael Keaton, and I am just delighted. I'm such a Michael Keaton fan, and he's awesome in this. The action sequences are killer. I see what you both are saying with regard to some of the visual effects, particularly the babies. They do look like dolls.
I will never. Those babies will never leave my mind, Jeff.
They look like dolls.
I will never forget the babies.
But it did not bother me. It did not detract from what I thought was such a fun. And you say it's long. I did not feel the length of it. It did not feel like a slog to me. I had a blast. I was having so much fun with all the characters and some of the big surprises. I loved it's amazing to me, and you referenced this too, Devindra. It's amazing to me that we keep seeing approaches to a multiverse, and every time it's a great movie. Like everything everywhere all at once. Spider-Man, live action Spider-Man. Like it doesn't matter. Evidently, this subject matter works. And I wonder if that speaks to where we are in popular culture, where everything is a reference to everything else, and everything, we are so seeped in memes and pop culture literacy and knowledge of that. Movies that sort of take advantage of that and bend back on themselves and use all of those tools to tell a story, I think are particularly primed to work in our pop culture brains right now. Maybe that's just a theory I'm running with.
I think we also desperately want to live in another universe. We want to get out of this timeline.
Well, that's true too. We want to be able to think that we can fix things or change things or move things to another timeline. Or
right. I mean, I think you guys have presented some plausible reasons why multiverse stories seem to resonate so much, but for me, the one that thematically is most interesting with real life is just this idea that every one of us lost some. Like every one of us had a future that was taken away from us in the pandemic somehow, right? Like we all had this alternate future that we didn't experience because we lost a significant portion of our lives to this thing. And I think there's a lot of people that think of what might have been, and that's basically the multiverse storytelling is the ultimate manifestation of that.
I think that's not untrue, but I don't think that's the entire story.
Sure.
I think there's more to it than that. I think so much of the fun of Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man, No Way Home, and this movie are the breadth of knowledge we have about pop culture and its permutations, and how they can pluck from all those permutations and craft something that acknowledges all of the different ways that these properties have been used and changed and reinterpreted over time. And people of our age who have lived through the sort of rise and fall and re-rise of a lot of these pop culture properties, these IP, when that journey is acknowledged and sort of and referenced and used and sort of honored in some way, I think there's a gratification to that. I don't know about kids walking in there without any of that knowledge, enjoying it quite as much. But I certainly
to your point, by the way, Jeff, we are all Rutger Hauer at the end of Blade Runner. We have seen things. That is how we describe the world, by references to things.
Exactly.
And that's our entire worldview. Also want to point out, it's very much the Ready Player One thing too, where this pop culture exists and has defined us. And now it's all just like a Katamari Damacy ball of pop culture. Like it's just building and building. And I think this movie is like one of the biggest examples of that as far back as it goes.
But I think that's, you kind of present that as a pejorative, and I don't think it is necessarily. I mean,
it could be good or bad.
Into the Spider-Verse could be described that way. Across the Spider-Verse could be described that way. No Way Home could be described that way. I think those are some of the greatest movie experiences I've had, and I would put Flash and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I would put those as top tier cinematic experiences for me. I had a blast with Flash. I don't know how much I would change. I love the look and feel of how the Flash moves, and the expression of that superpower is really cool and very different than we've ever seen it before. Obviously we've seen the slow down stuff, but just the sort of like kinetic, the way he move, we saw it in the Justice League movie, the way he sort of slow motion moves and his arms are wildly flailing. I love that. But the way electricity is expressed in this movie and the lightning and all of that stuff.
They even get the like pose, the like Flash getting ready to run pose. It's like, oh, that's familiar. And that is Ezra Miller doing that very, very difficult looking pose too, which is,
and I would say
physicality. Yeah.
One of the best things about this movie that has been all too rarely utilized in the sort of post-Snyder version of the DC universe is it's very funny.
Yeah.
It's very funny intentionally. It's deft at its humor. It is there are broad comedic sections of the film that are intended to just entertain and make me laugh. And I was laughing a lot through it. I thought it was really well done in that way. We saw, little glimpses of humor in the Wonder Woman movies, but not to the extent this movie uses them. And I think, I don't want to say they learned from Marvel in this way, but it's certainly something that shares in a lot of Marvel films where they're not afraid to, in a big, high octane, serious movie where we're blasting aliens from space, still take time to be goofy and silly and fun. And I had so much fun with Flash in that regard. And a lot of that credit goes to Ezra Miller for a very finely tuned comedic performance, I think.
I largely agree with Jeff on this one. I think this was a very enjoyable movie. I mean, I think I love this kind of story, which is time travel story. Like Time Crimes is one of my favorite movies. The idea of trying to escape, Back to the Future, one of my favorite movies. The idea of trying to escape your past, the idea of like the past and the present being these oppressive forces that you can't escape from. Like all this stuff it just appeals to David Chen generally.
I'm in that boat too.
This type of time travel story. So it's like, okay, and this is a very competent execution of it, I would say. Very competent execution. So I think this movie did a good job of delivering on that very basic level. I also agree that, again, if you evaluate Ezra Miller's just performance in and of itself, separately from any of the context around it, I think they do a solid job. They have to play against themselves as a younger version of themselves. And I think that's just a fascinating idea. Who among us hasn't thought about what it might be like to go back in time and be able to like interact with your past self, and how angry and disappointed and frustrated you might be at that person, and how much positivity you might wish for their future that like might go unfulfilled. Like all that stuff is brought up by this movie. Now,
also, can I say one quick thing about that? You're talking about visual effects. Remember a time when you could sort of see the seams when anybody
there's an invisible line down the center of the screen.
Do you remember that? You remember how frequent it was so obvious? And then like Multiplicity Man came out. And speaking of Keaton, but like we have gotten to the point now where it just seems so casual to be able to put an actor with themselves. It's wild.
And what's amazing is any shot where there's the actor with themselves, like every single shot that has to be meticulously planned out.
Yes, and there's so much of it in this movie, and there's so much of the actor physically interacting with themselves. It's wild to like that used to be so hard to do, and it just seems so effortless. Like there aren't specific shots where they're doing that. It's just happening all the time.
It's happening all the time. Yeah, and there's if you want another great example, Dead Ringers on Prime Video with Rachel Weisz, she plays a dual role in that, and it feels like magic.
Yeah, it really does.
And what there's like one of my favorite shots from Dead Ringers is like she's interacting with her twin sister in Dead Ringers in an elevator. And you can kind of see like, and I'm like in my mind, I'm like, oh, I see the invisible line that they did, and then right at the last minute, she like reaches out and like grabs her hand. And it's like a magical. I was like, oh, it took my breath away because I'm like, oh wow, that's amazing. There's those kinds of moments where you're like, oh, I think I knew how they did that but then in this movie, it's way beyond that, because like Dead Ringers is a lot of like static shots. It's very like locked up. This is like the shots are moving. There's tons of visual effects, different lighting conditions. So yeah, you just kind of accept it. I might have an unpopular opinion on the following, which is, the presence of Michael Keaton in this movie activated something in my lizard brain where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's cool. Yeah. Like,
and the Danny Elfman theme, like all together.
I have played I learned how to play the Danny Elfman theme on piano when I was in like elementary school. Like it's a core part of my childhood. So to see Michael Keaton at all was like amazing.
And they shamelessly use that theme. I mean, at every moment he's on screen, there's some Danny Elfman hint creeping in.
I don't think the juice was worth the squeeze. In my opinion. What I mean by that is like, okay, let me take another. We'll talk more in spoilers, but let's take another example of Spider-Man No Way Home. So at this point, like spoilers for Spider-Man, but the other Spider-Men show up in Spider-Man No Way Home. that to me meant a lot. It meant a lot because, first of all, on a baseline level, those characters talk about their experiences. They all had different experiences as Spider-Man, and they talk about them and how it shaped them differently, right?
This should be in spoilers, this conversation. Right. I completely understand where you're coming from, Dave, but we need to talk about it in spoilers.
That's fair. Okay, fair point. But my overall point being, I don't think this movie does that, but we'll talk about more momentarily. But overall, I think like when it comes to the time travel stuff, it delivers, and I cried a little bit at the end. It's very moving. It's a very moving story. My theater went wild for this movie. It's a very crowd pleasing movie. Like they loved all these. There's a lot of like red meat for the DC fans in this movie, and the movie is very unabashed about throwing this red meat at the audience, and the audience ate it up. They were like, "This is amazing." They loved it. So.
I mean, it really is the Spider-Man No Way Home of the DC universe.
In many ways, yeah. Mm-hmm. So. If that's your kind of movie, then I think you'll like this movie. But overall, it sounds like we all thought it was a solid superhero film. And that's pretty rare in the DC universe, or has felt rare in the past, at least. Much more to discuss. Let's get to spoilers for The Flash starting right now. All right, it's time for the parents to fight. Me and Jeff.
I may be on your side a bit here too, Dave.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Listen, let's see. I said I understand where you're coming from. I'll let you state your case, but I understand where you're coming from.
I'll finish the case, which is just that, like, when they brought back the Spider-Man in No Way Home, first, like on a baseline level, the Spider-Man talk about their experiences. Like, there's a reason each of them kind of brings something different to why they're there.
They're different ages. They've gone through different things. Yeah,
but also like both of those Spider-Man franchises, in my opinion, ended ignominiously.
Yes.
Andrew Garfield, I think, was just treated poorly by the franchise. Spider-Man 3, some people praise it, but like Sam Raimi Spider-Man 3, many people don't think it was very good, and kind of like a bummer entry to end the series on.
Yeah.
So the idea that you come back and kind of like redeem it, and have these characters all like kind of celebrate their Spider-Man-ness together, was very powerful to me. You know, it was my number 2 movie of that year. Michael Keaton.
It was your number 1 movie of that year.
I think it was 9 Days. Was it that movie? Yeah.
Maybe.
So, I thought he was number 1.
No.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, Michael Keaton. I don't think Michael Keaton brings anything to this film. Like his version of Batman brings anything to this film. Let me finish the sentence, Jeff. That
you finished it.
That any other version of Batman, including Ben Affleck's version of Batman, couldn't have brought to this. You know, like it could have been Ben Affleck. In this version of the universe, he's old, and all the other stuff has whatever, or he's not Batman anymore, and he needs to come back. Like it's the iconography of Michael Keaton's Batman is beautifully done. The original Batmobile, the Batwing, amazing, beautiful. Love it. But it's just like beyond. Hey, look, it's the cool thing. I don't know that you needed to have Michael Keaton in this movie.
It also doesn't do much with it, which is my thing. Like, you see Michael Keaton move as an old man better than he ever did in the first Batman or Batman Returns. He's a 60-something old man. He is moving like a 20-year-old gymnast. There's no verisimilitude to this performance. Like, he should be old. He should be tired. We see him after the battle. It's like, oh, I'm beating, I'm sewing all my cuts. I am a tough guy. That is even a moment to express some sort of vulnerability here in terms of his age and the life he lived. And this movie doesn't really do that. Yeah. He is just there to wear the suit, say the lines, say the thing. And the audience did not need to say, let's go nuts. I hated that.
But the audience can go, hey, it's the thing, remember. Okay.
Do the thing. Do the thing.
Say the line. Do the thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Jeff Kanata, make the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually restate what you said, I think, in a more focused way.
In a more eloquent, articulate, focused.
No, just in a more... Well, maybe it's not exactly how you feel, but here's where I agree with you. Contextually, for this film, there's no reason it should be Michael Keaton. The idea of No Way Home is that there are these multiverses, and we, the audience in the seats, have witnessed different versions of Spider-Man that have existed in parallel, right? And this movie brings them all into the same timeline briefly, right? And that makes sense, right? We did see a different version of Spider-Man, and those different versions of Spider-Man didn't acknowledge each other. They happened in parallel. This movie says Ezra Miller's character, it's the Flash, Barry Allen, goes back in time and changes time to a version of time where Eric Stoltz played Marty McFly, which is not the world that Michael Keaton's Batman was in. That's not the world Michael Keaton's Batman was in. Michael Keaton's Batman was in a world where...
Do we know that, though? I don't think we know that.
No, there's no proof, Jeff.
No, I'm saying from the audience's perspective. As an audience member,
I see, because Michael Keaton was he was in our universe, and we had a Michael J. Fox back to the future.
It's a different universe than Ben Affleck's Batman is in, but it's not a different universe than Michael J. Fox's Marty McFly was in.
We don't know whether Back to the Future existed in Tim Burton's Batman's world.
We don't.
Okay, fair enough.
But the point I'm trying to make is that the language of the movie is different than the language of the Spider-Man movie. The language of this movie isn't that, hey, audience member, all of these things were happening in parallel. All the fictions that you saw were happening in parallel, and for this moment they converge. That's not the language of the Flash.
Correct, Jeff. I don't know if you know this, but when you make a change in the past, it doesn't diverge. It's like a fulcrum.
When did Batman become a quantum physics expert?
I did love that. I did love that because that's actually accurate to quantum. Okay, that is actually accurate to quantum physics.
I thought it was fine. It's cool. It's fine.
I love the spaghetti. The spaghetti scene. We've seen that scene in so many movies, and I've never seen it done like that, and it was awesome. That was awesome.
It was cool, but it did leave me asking, when did Bruce Wayne get his physics PhD?
He's the world's greatest detective. He's the world's greatest detective.
He built all that stuff that you see in the cave.
He gets people to build that for him. He's a billionaire. Come on, Jeff.
All right, Jeff. Finish your point. Finish your point, Jeff.
So here's where I agree with you.
Yeah.
I sat there going, this movie is not giving me the tools as the viewer to justify why it's Michael Keaton and not Ben Affleck, right? It's not expressing the multiverse in a way that is like, oh yeah, he's jumped to the timeline of Michael Keaton's universe. Because he hasn't, right? That's not what the movie is saying.
Right. Correct.
It is arbitrary that it's Michael Keaton. So that is where I totally agree with you guys. And I think that's a failure of the movie. It's not a failure. It's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity of the movie to feel like that, because ultimately what the movie gets to when we get into that moment of him seeing all the different spheres, and it's like, that is that idea expressed. It is like, hey, there was a universe where the Kevin Smith Superman movie got made. And I will tell you guys, I lost my ever-loving mind when they showed that.
I did think of you during that.
Yeah. I lost my... And it was such a funny thing. I don't mean to say this in a way to brag or anything like that. I just want to tell you the truth of what happened, which is I got it like 38 seconds before the rest of my audience. Like I went... like that in the middle of it, and it was dead silent. And I saw the spider, and I was like, but like people were like, what? And then full on Nicolas Cage face came on, and everybody lost it. But like, it was such an amazing moment because I was like, I don't know, just a step ahead.
We should explain that it is a part of internet lore that Kevin Smith helped to popularize, which is that there was another version of Superman that was going to be made that starred Nicolas Cage and that featured a giant spider. If you Google this, Kevin Smith spider, you'll find the story.
They should have done the suit. They should have done the test suit though, the like glowing test suit that is also internet lore.
I mean, they did the long hair from the test. They did the version.
Google Kevin Smith Spider-Man or Superman spider story.
He's told the story many times at Comic-Con.
It's like a legendary story. But there are. I'm bringing it all up because I can understand there might be people, especially some of the younger folks listening, who might not know what that's all about. But
anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that moment where we're seeing that, we're seeing Christopher Reeve, which also kind of made me feel like that's a little icky. But and seeing even what's his name, George Reeve, and the 60s Batman. We're seeing basically that idea, which, Into the Spider-Verse is done now, or excuse me, Across the Spider-Verse is done now. And that idea is that all these fictional interpretations that we, the audience, have lived through in the context of these movies are different timelines where those fictions are the true fiction of the IP.
Yeah.
So it gets there. Yeah. And that's, I found that to be a very fun moment, very cool, fan service, yes, but fun. It just doesn't do that earlier. It doesn't do that to justify Keaton being there. Now,
yes.
So this is where I completely agree with you guys and have the same thought.
Yeah.
That said, it's fucking Michael Keaton, dude.
Well,
that's it.
I feel the same way. I'm like, dude, yes, it's delightful to see him there, but I'm just
like, this is how we get him back in the suit. Like, okay, would I prefer a Batman Beyond movie where he gets to play old Bruce Wayne with the protege?
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
But nobody seems to be listening to those emails that I keep sending.
By the way, Ezra Miller would have been a great the Batman Beyond guy. Like, he looks just like him too.
You're right.
My thing is, Jeff, like it is the lizard brain thing though. It is, I know you're tricking me.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And it's also like, you gotta earn it. At the very least, let him be old. Let him be in pain. Give me that verisimilitude.
Preach.
That is something that bothered me a bit about It Chapter 2 as well. Like, there was a lot of weird tonal shifts in that movie. And it's like they didn't fully understand like what they were trying to tell with that. So
nobody wants to see old Batman. I mean, Batman Beyond.
I do. You're asking for Batman Beyond.
Yes, but that's different.
He's old. He's not on the suit. He can't move.
I love, dude, every single second that Keaton was in that suit, doing whatever it was he was doing, I was exploding inside.
Not moving like Michael Keaton.
I don't care.
Moving like a CG character, like not even like a stuntman, honestly, most of the time. Like when he's flying down, busting up those dudes.
Dude, it's the summer of old dudes. I mean, I just saw Indiana Jones last night. It's the summer of old dudes just doing it. It's okay. Let the old dudes do it. I also want to say Affleck was awesome in this movie. The first action sequence with Batman, like falling behind the things and bouncing off stuff, that was awesome. I loved it. It was epic.
It was more the post scene with Wonder Woman, like that. It's that Bruce Wayne with Barry Allen being funny together, I think is a lot of fun.
The shot from the bridge where you see the car fall and we stay here. We don't cut closer. We stay on the bridge and you just see Batman like hop out of the car door, shoot the
grappling hook.
Grappling hook, yeah. And it hits in the foreground. Sick shot, dude.
Yeah, that's
sick.
Good. That was good. I like that. But okay, it doesn't sound like you're really arguing against what I'm saying, which is that
I'm saying you're right, but more you are wrong.
Mm-hmm. I think I feel largely the same way, which is like I enjoyed Michael Keaton in this movie as well, but I'm like, oh, I wish the movie had A, done more to earn his presence in the film, B, done more with the character once he showed up. And one of the problems of the movie is it is very overstuffed. Like there are they need to get Michael Keaton in the movie. They need to get Kara Zor-El in the movie. They need to theoretically have each of them have like some kind of satisfying arc, which, you know, there is an arc for each of those characters, but it's like the most perfunctory arc.
I did not see an arc for Kara. Like that felt weird to me.
Well, she hates humans and
then doesn't. You know, so that's the arc. Yeah. Because she sees that humans are good, kind of.
Okay.
So yeah.
And then she dies.
Yeah.
And then Michael Keaton dies. Why are you going to bring back Michael Keaton to kill him as Batman? I didn't need that imagery in my life.
I don't know.
Multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times.
It's about changing. It's about changing the past. And
okay. So I'm just gonna put this out there. At some spoilers for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the one that just came out. Okay, spoilers for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse are gonna happen. We're gonna spoil both movies now, but I do want to acknowledge that I think there's a possibility that the Flash might have the opposite message of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, right?
Yeah.
It is very much dealing with the same theme of what must happen or what must not happen.
Exactly. And this is why I'm kind of like, everyone's like, oh, why David Chen? Your complaints are nonsense. We already know what Spider-Verse is going to say. And I'm like, no, we don't, guys.
We don't.
The second half of the movie could go in wildly different directions. We just don't know what it's going to say. But what is clear is what this movie is saying, which I really like, which is like, hey, the people we have lost, the tragedies that have happened to us, it is important that they were that way. Like, they make us who we are. And even though we wish they never would have happened, ultimately by trying to not make them happen, like, we can actually do more damage to both ourselves and the people around us.
They're not incompatible is the thing, because what they're trying to solve, what Miles Morales is trying to solve, is something that will potentially happen versus something that did happen to Barry Allen's mom.
Fair. So, I mean, fair enough.
Nothing is incompatible here.
Okay. So, all right. Fair. I guess that's technically true, but
actually, we're talking about time. We gotta be technical.
That's a really astute point. actually, Devindra. I think that's a very astute point, because I think that might be the fulcrum upon which the entire plot of Beyond the Spider-Verse rests.
It's possible. We don't know. But
we don't know, but
it's possible. Yeah,
it's certainly possible.
But I love that was the message of this movie, and like when he goes and says goodbye to his mom,
it's amazing.
It's very goofy when the character says goodbye to his mom, but like, because the whole
I also
thing,
think a mom would know a little bit. Like he
like shows up. He shows up. He has all these tags on his body. Like it's weird, but and the mom might not be that receptive to him.
Mom would be like, "Are you my time traveling son older?"
There have been weird things. Well, the kid was
Marty,
like 10.
Marty
point,
McFly.
Right?
What a lovely name. We should name my third child that.
The kid was 10 right then. So yeah.
By the way, you mentioned the actor who plays Nora. Is Maribel Verdú. People might recognize her from Y Tu Mamá También.
Oh yes,
still crushing it after all these years. But yeah, she's amazing. But yeah, the scene at the end when like he meets his mom one last time, it was very, very powerful. Very powerful to me.
I welled up.
Yeah, and it delivers on the premise. It's like, hey, you tried to go back, you messed things up. And it's like we got to undo it and like make things back the way they were. Yeah.
The solve for saving his dad was pretty clever. Just put them on the top shelf. That's great. It's so great.
Very, very nice.
I mean, we got to talk about the very final shot of the movie, which is very like Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, like the Aristocrats kind of style ending. But yes, it is worth calling out that at the very end of the movie, Barry Allen has changed the time stream once again so that his father is exonerated at trial. And as a result, he has changed what we now understand to be the past as well in this. So then he's walking out of the courtroom and Bruce Wayne shows up, and out of the car, Bruce Wayne steps, but it's not Ben Affleck. It's George Clooney.
Yeah, people clapped in my theater for that.
Amazing.
Like, just for George Clooney being George Clooney.
That he was willing to do it. Like, that's what you're clapping for, is he was willing to do it.
He got out of a car. That's all we need you to do, George.
Yeah.
This is why I said in the earlier part of our review that I think this movie actually does a wonderful job of sort of closing the book on this version of the DCU, because you can't do Ben Affleck as Batman anymore, right? If Barry Allen lives in the universe where George Clooney's like it's just a wonderful
his own timeline though. Now
we're done with all these characters. It just felt like, oh, we've told the story of all these characters. We're done. We're gonna do a new version now.
Yeah,
but the post-credit sequence is like. Oh, also Aquaman. We shot some scenes with Aquaman that we didn't put in this movie.
Imagine if Christian Bale showed up at the end. That would have been like mind blowing.
I was thinking because the motorcycle looks a lot like the Tumbler motorcycle early on. But what I was thinking too is like I left the movie thinking like he's not home. He's not actually in his home timeline. Like maybe he changed it. This is another branch. It's another
he needs to go back and stop himself from putting the thing on the top corner. And then
it's the only solve.
That's what he's gonna do. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think having George Clooney as Batman is
this is Homer Simpson in that Treehouse of Horrors episode. It's like, this one's good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Close enough.
Yeah.
We don't need to fix this one. We got George Clooney. Come on.
George Clooney. Close enough. Right,
no slide to Ben Affleck, but come on.
We have to also talk about the fact that this movie is about one man's quest to undo an unthinkable tragedy. That tragedy being the end of Man of Steel. So we see reenactments.
Bravo.
We see reenactments of the end of Man of Steel. Michael Shannon shows up as Zod. It's love. Michael Shannon's awesome in everything. Like I just love seeing the energy that he brings is amazing. Jeff Canada, I'm curious, like what you thought of the idea, like how this movie handled redoing the end of Man of Steel, basically.
I loved it. I thought it was really cool. It's funny how it tries to retcon Superman as being like this benevolent force throughout the whole thing. He's like, man, Superman was just trying so hard to do good. It's like, man, I saw that movie. I saw that movie.
I like that they bring up like in his universe, Superman killed Zod, and they're like, yeah, and that was great and it's like. It was a very sad, tragic moment in Man of Steel. It was like very sad and depressing when that happened.
Yes.
But in this universe, I think it's like celebrated as like thank God Superman was around to do that, kind of deal.
I kept honestly waiting for Superman to show up because they kept talking about. He's like, oh, she's like, what did you do with them? He's like, we killed the infant. I was like, oh, it is an infant. Ah, bummer. I was like, I wanted Superman to be like, here I am, dudes. It is pretty wild that the third act of this movie takes place in another movie.
yeah. It actually was very similar. It reminded me a lot of Avengers Endgame for many reasons.
Another multiverse movie. That's great.
You have endless CG creatures fighting on a gray, desolate landscape. But also, you have a version of this character that like has no memory of, a version of the enemy that like has not met the hero of the story, right? Which is like, so very timey-wimey time travel stuff that's very similar to Avengers Endgame ending. But yeah, I thought it was, all that stuff is basically in service of this idea that you can't change fate. Because we see Michael Keaton's and Kara Zor-El die again and again and again. And I thought that was like a cool way of like, we're bringing back, that was a cool thing where it's like, we're bringing back the end of Man of Steel, but it's not just so you can be like, hey, remember that? It's so they can make this point about like, and this is the place where those characters die.
Yeah.
I really like that. Devindra, did you have any reaction to the Man of Steel stuff? What do you think?
I mean, I think it was good. I do remember us being pretty disappointed by the way Man of Steel wrapped up, and also like the sheer amount of like collateral damage that was in that movie too. And even this movie addresses that at the beginning of Batman v Superman, directly address that stuff too. So I feel like they're always going to be thinking about that. I like this stuff too. I also have to say, I wish Supergirl got to do more because I really liked her as an actor.
Great.
Yeah,
she's just like she has the like boldness of somebody. She's a super person, but doesn't have that idea that she has to protect us all, because why should she? Humans imprisoned her. Like it is a very cool concept. I think she's very good in this movie, and she has good like banter with everybody.
Emo
else, so,
Supergirl is a cool idea. Yeah,
I love it. Yeah,
I do have an issue with like, I don't think you needed both Supergirl and Batman in this. Like, I think it might have been stronger if you only had one of them. But
the idea is they built a version of the Justice League in this movie, which I thought was cool.
But putting that aside, I think the script just does so many smart things, like what I just said with the Man of Steel stuff. Also, the idea of Barry Allen needing to interact with his younger self, and also him losing the powers to the younger self. That's just like a cool concept of like, they kind of have flash powers, but like in an annoying way, and I like, that's just all great dramatic tension stuff, it's just really
shout out to the screenwriter, by the way, Christina Hodson, who did Birds of Prey and Bumblebee. So yeah, good stuff.
How many moments of just pure joy and laughter at that. We what happens is we actually get this movie sort of surreptitiously giving us a Flash origin story.
Yes.
It's like the coolest way to do a Flash origin story. And, he's like reliving how he got his powers. Like, I'm going to go and take you to this moment. We've never seen that cinematically before,
right.
Very cool. Like it's a very smart script.
Yeah.
And there's all the fun we have of goofy teenage Barry Allen messing around and discovering his powers and thinking they're cool, and, accidentally going through the floor and then running back up with a pot over him. Yeah. It's like, it's so much fun stuff there.
Did he do phasing in the other movies? Because that feels like a comic pull. That's a comic pull.
That was cool. That was cool when they zoomed into the subatomic level and they showed you what phasing is too.
He's vibrating so fast. He's going between the molecules.
There was a bunch of moments there, like when he walks in with the girl he's trying to impress, and everything falls out, and I'm like, he would just super fast clean that up. Like she wouldn't even notice that it fell out. Anyway,
the only one that would work is when he left. Like that one made sense.
Yeah.
Oh, and we have to acknowledge, like, the opening scene of this movie is awesome. Like when he saving the idea of saving the babies and each baby having a different peril. Like that's just really like it's just
it was
such a fun thing. Like
I'm gonna use the word. It was very cartoonish because it's like, this baby, a bottle of acid. It's gonna this baby has sharp things coming right to him. Like, what are you gonna do, Barry?
It sets a good tone for the movie, which is don't take this too seriously. This is not like Zack Snyder's movie. I wish
that whole thing looked better, but it was a lot of fun. And the idea of him basically cleaning up after Bruce Wayne, I think, is very relatable. It just makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
just the moment where we see the window, the lady losing all the babies out the window.
Yeah. Oh, huge laugh from the audience. Right.
It's just like the audacity of the movie to just throw 15 babies out a window.
We're gonna do hard boiled at the beginning of the movie. In minute 5, it's all hard boiled. The ending. Do want to shout out I do like the idea of Kid Barry being in that time verse forever and basically becoming a weird old decrepit version of himself
so cool.
is also a really cool concept.
Oh, like it was amazing. And what's great about it, so at the beginning, Barry Allen is knocked out of the Chrono Bowl, right? By an unseen dark force, and you're like, oh, that's probably the villain of the story. Then, like at the end of the movie, during the Man of Steel stuff, you see Barry Allen start getting these like spikes in his arm, and it's like
he's like, I'm cool with it.
And
I like the spikes.
like you as the audience, like realizing what is happening. It's like a great moment where you're like, oh, that's what he's the villain of the story, and
or at least one antagonist,
very satisfying.
Because Zod is not really in this movie much. It's very weird. As much as Michael Shannon is focused and is in the big battle, like I would have liked a little more there too, but I don't know. I
have one other nerdy plot hole that occurred to me. I love the need for nourishment, need for calories, because he's moving so quickly that he's gonna run through them. And I love how when he's literally, babies are falling through the air and he takes time, like his first thought is, you see him going for the baby and then he punches through the vending machine and gets food and he's just stuffing his face. There's a moment there where he looks at his watch and it goes, oh, you're cool now. And it's like, how fast does the processing have to be on that watch to change in real time when he's moving so quickly? Anyway,
that's
dumb. That's dumb.
Later on in the movie, like young Barry Allen moves older Barry Allen really fast, and then older Barry Allen throws up, and it's like, wouldn't have all those babies thrown up if he was moving them all super fast?
They talk about that. He specifically doesn't move those babies fast. He could have saved them all fast, but the whole point of that sequence was he can't move baby. He puts one in a microwave because later he's like, well, you can move a microwave fast because it can hold up. Remember?
Yeah, a person. Literally
he explains that exact
young
point,
Barry.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough.
But the setup and payoff to the throw up is also very good, because you're remembering he's saying, "Oh, you moved me? Oh, instant vomit."
I guess I'm saying, did he not move any other people in the course of the entire film? That's kind of what
I guess
what came to mind. Maybe that's,
I don't know if he's done that before.
Maybe that's true.
It was great though, like the smash cut of like Batman kicking ass and then back to him going, "Whoa!" It was
that was good.
So funny. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you can tell, like, overall, there's a lot of great things about this movie that, like, I understand why it's such a crowd pleaser.
It knocked me for a loop, man. I just could not believe how good it was. I had so much fun with it. I would go see it again. I had a great time with it.
I am not a crackpot, guys. But people need to stop bringing up Eric Stoltz in Back to the Future.
But what a great way to signal you're in a different timeline.
I just watched this Michael J. Fox documentary Still, which is a great documentary on Apple TV Plus. Again, brings out the Eric Stoltz story. Eric Stoltz was cast in Back to the Future, shot for several weeks before he was removed from the picture, and then Michael J. Fox took over. I just feel bad for Eric Stoltz, man. Like, can you imagine if, like,
he's
literally? Fine. How do you know that? How do you know that, Jeff?
You think he's waking up at night going, "They talked about me in The Flash. They talked about my greatest scar."
He literally has the timeline.
You think that literally, if like the number one thing you are known for in America is not being in Back to the Future, like that wouldn't get to you in some way?
Didn't he get an Academy Award nomination for Elephant Man? Like he's had a nice career, dude.
But he didn't have Michael J. Fox's career. Is the thing.
He wouldn't have had Michael J. Fox's career with Back to the Future either. I think.
But well, anyway, I think it's just like unless they got Eric Stoltz's permission, which in that case, great. Like that's awesome.
He must think it's funny at this
point.
But
if they didn't get Eric Stoltz's permission, then that's kind of cold, man. To like constantly be dragging out this thing from the past of like, hey, remember that time you got fired from one of the most beloved films of all time? Okay.
He was in Pulp Fiction, Michael J. Fox can't say that.
Before we wrap, I do want to say I think the Christopher Reeve thing was weird.
It did give me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. Yeah.
It's a reminder of what Ghostbusters Afterlife did, and I'm not a fan. Just not a fan. I understand the need to express it. Like, show a clip from one of those movies. Don't have a weird. And they say it's archival footage, but it looks like a weird dead CG version.
It looks like the terrible. It's like looks like the terrible CG version. And literally, my audience erupted in applause. And and it's like, but it's like they're applauding a lifeless CG recreation of this dead person, And it's like the whole thing felt kind of dystopian.
It's so weird. So you guys don't watch Attack on Titan. but Andy Muschietti is going to be directing the live action Attack on Titan movie. And that movie is all about those things. That anime is all about these weird giants that look like humans, destroying people. The CG characters, Christopher Reeves and a whole bunch of them, look like those monsters from Attack on Titan. They don't look human. It's kind of horrific in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you. This I will tell you this that I'm not cool with is people posting these clips from that scene in the movie on Twitter before the movie even came out as an attempt to kind of be like, look at this. It's terrible. Like the movie's terrible because it has it. And it's like, okay, that's fine if you think that it's terrible, but like, don't ruin the movie let people watch the movie and decide for themselves that it's bad. But like, don't try to like ruin the movie for them by posting clips like completely out of context in a way that doesn't make any sense. Not a fan.
It is funny that we don't object to George Reeve. He's just been dead longer, He has.
Well, also apparently Christopher Reeve's estate gave permission for the usage of his image in this way.
Yeah, they'd
so
have to.
yeah. So I agree with you. I don't like it. I don't like it when movies reanimate dead people. That's just it sits poorly with me, and in general, it looks bad.
And like Adam West has passed away too. Like everybody in that sequence is dead except Nick Cage.
It is, but I think the Christopher Reeve one looked the worst, and we didn't see Adam West's face. We just saw him in the costume.
In the getup. Right. Yeah. So anyway, weird moment, but the Nicolas Cage part was great. Like I can't believe they went for that.
Incredible.
And it really showed like they're making it for. They're making this movie for the nerds, for the fans. It's like the people who've been following the saga of Batman and Superman for literal decades.
Poor Brendan Routh though gets no love.
Yeah,
poor Brendan Routh.
Yeah.
Oh,
what was up with that? I'm sure he was available.
He was what? I'll shoot stuff. You don't even have to see.
Guys,
I'm making CW shows right now. Just have me come over to the studio.
Do you guys want the? Anyway,
I'm sure he's fine. He seems like a nice dude. I've watched a lot of interviews with him. He seems like such a decent guy.
He seems like a nice guy, but I always wanted him to have a bigger career.
I agree.
Thing, so.
Yeah.
I'm gonna now, Jeff, because I'm gonna make it my mission to contact Eric Stoltz to see how he feels about this.
Do it.
Because
I can't imagine he's not fine with it. Like the idea that he'd be harboring resentment from that. I don't know.
Really? You don't think that if someone brought up something that like from decades ago that was like a fairly, I'm sure a fairly painful memory
by now. It's been 30 years. So
40
years. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess you guys are really better at moving on and forgiving and forgetting than me, it sounds like. So
yeah.
40 years from now, you're going to bring up this conversation.
Remember 40 years ago when we had that episode and you guys disagreed with me about Eric Stoltz? I've held it in my heart ever since. All right. Man. Any other thoughts on The Flash?
Fun movie.
Fun movie. What did you guys think of the post-credits? I mean, it's like, it seemed to me that they may have shot a bunch more Aquaman stuff. Can you
describe it to me? Because I left. And I was like, I'm not going back in that theater.
It's Barry Allen and Aquaman. Aquaman is drunk walking out of a bar. And Barry Allen's like, hey, man, I got to get you home. And he's like, okay, no, you're going to need to go get more beer. And he falls on the ground and there's a big puddle of water. And he falls face first into the water. And he's like, fine, because it's Aquaman. And which is a very funny idea. And Barry Allen says, you can't stay here. This is not your home. And he points at the water and he goes, this is my home. And that's pretty much the whole thing.
Okay.
But there is
that's good.
Yeah, it's just a jokey, fun scene. But there's a moment where when they first come walking out, Aquaman says, so you're telling me that in every version of the universe, I'm still awesome? And he's like, oh, yeah, you're still awesome. Which made me think like there's scenes that they cut out of this movie where he finds Aquaman, you know? But maybe I'm wrong.
I think he was making him feel good then, maybe. I don't know.
I
kept waiting for it to be like the gold, blonde Aquaman walk out, but that didn't happen.
I did appreciate that one of the first ways that Barry Allen realizes something's wrong is when he calls Tom Curry, played by Tamura Morrison from Aquaman. And it's like, hey, isn't your wife like the Queen of Atlantis? And I'm like, are we about to see a Nicole Kidman appearance in The Flash? And it's like not Nicole Kidman. And I thought that was very amusing. So no
aspersions on the woman playing his wife in this movie, but
absolutely not.
I feel like not a better timeline for
it was a funny, is your wife the queen of the ocean? Cut to her. It's like, yeah, in my heart, yes.
Because you want to talk to my dog? That was very funny.
Well, at the end of the day, it's really impressive that Andy Muschietti made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.